Huzzah and welcome to Dungeon Door. I am your host, Parthesius Parsnip, and today I am dressed like the Quaker Oatmeal Man because clearly I was not bullied enough as a child. Now today we are also reviewing Oathsworn Into the Deepwood, a game where you swear an oath to fight monsters and hopefully they don't insert their deepwood into you. Let's get into it. Alright, check the specs, Johnny boy. This game comes in, well, this is one box if you want to, but if you want the additional miniatures with it, you're going to have to buy these 2 additional boxes with it. There's also a 4th box for an armory kit where you can get different little arms and legs for all of your miniatures if you're about that life, I guess. I, however, am not about that life, because to me, building and painting miniatures is just about as fun as sticking a hamster into a blender. Always a bad time, always a mess, and Pete is going to get called regardless. Now, as for the other boxes of miniatures that I do have, normally this would be the time in the video where I do a very nice reel over some non-copyright jazz or R&B music to display them to you. However, I can't do that in this scenario because you see this game is shrouded in more secrecy than a toxic relationship. Everything in this game is hidden either behind a tuck box or an envelope that you will open at a later date when you get to it. You see, because the core loop of this game is over the course of 21 chapters that took me and my group 13 sessions and 74 hours to complete, you will be going chapter by chapter and figuring out exactly what monster you and your Oathsworn company are going to face, gathering up the clues, getting whatever information you can, and then eventually battling the monster as well-equipped as you can. So they unveil the monster usually at the end of the chapter for you, which is why each miniature is hidden behind a tuck box or an envelope if you just go for the standee version. Alright, now speaking of miniatures, I can show you the character miniatures, and I can also show you the worst construed idea I've seen since smoking on an aeroplane. Look at this beautiful character miniature, right? Nice little war polar bear. Pretty cool, right? Pretty cool. Well, this is the exception. This is how most of your characters are going to end up. I literally tried to put this together right now to showcase to you how easily these miniatures fall apart, and I can't even do it because the pieces simply won't stick onto this guy. You see, all the miniatures that come for each of the characters are not made with the sameness in mind of how intact they are. Now, the reason they make these miniatures come apart so easily is because you're supposed to buy that armory box I mentioned earlier, and then you're supposed to mix and match the different arms and helmets and whatnot, so that way, whatever equipment you have on in the game is the same equipment you have indicated on your miniature. That is a wonderful idea in theory, but in practice, all it's doing is you're moving around the board with your guy, and then next thing you know, oh, my arm's off, oh, my leg's broken, oh, there goes my head rolling across the field, because any little minute movement on the character is going to just disassemble the entire miniature. And I was saying, oh, Dungeon Door, why don't you just glue the thing? Fuck you. Because I don't want to glue the thing, because what I do is I play the games, and then I resell the games, because I don't have the space for all of them, okay? And that defeats the entire purpose of buying the armory kit in the first place, because if you glue it together, then when you get a new piece of armor, you can't unglue it. Well, I think you can unglue it. I don't know. I don't know anything about miniatures. All I know is that this shit sucks. Alright, but let me calm down, I digress, before I anger myself talking about these miniatures more and I punch a wall like I'm a boy named Kyle. Now, when you start this game, you are going to pick from verisimilitude of different characters that you can be. Now, when I say characters, I should speak more of classes unique to this game, because there's not really characters behind this. When you get into the narrative portions, it's really just a dude that fits exactly in the type of archetype you would think for that class. Anyway, we've got Big Polar Bear Dude here, so we're going to use as our example. Now, this is the character sheet right here. All right, check it. You've got your little might track. You've got defense, health, a special ability, and this is going to be your animus track, which is also going to be your action points, so to speak. And then you'll see these little numbers around the sides, and that's your cooldown track. Don't worry, I'll explain everything in a second to you. When you pick up your character, you're also going to pick up the deck that belongs to your character. That's right, there's cards in this game. Whoop-de-doo, Basil, who would have known? Now, when you've got your cards going, as you go throughout the game and you level up your character, you're going to get to add new cards from the little tuck box that they come in, and you're going to get to add them to the deck, and I believe at a time you can only have about 5 cards in hand or so, and on your turn you're going to be playing these cards because that is going to be your action. So let's take one of the basic cards for Mr. Warbear here. You're gonna need a focus camera, thank you. Alright, so you've got, the title of the card, you've got the text of the card, and then right here is going to show how many animus or how many action points it's going to cost to play this card. It's also going to show up here where on the cooldown track you're going to play the card once you put it onto the field. Alright, so here we go. I just played the card, and it goes right there into the 3 slot as indicated. Now, it says 0 animus on the thing, but for the simplicity of this example, let's say that it costs 2 animus. So I would take 2 from here, and I would slide them over to this slot here, indicating that they've been used. You see, on your turn, you can do as many things as you want to do, as long as you have these little jelly cubes that tell you can. Now, since this is in the 3 slot, this card is essentially stuck here, until I play another card on top of it, that is also of a 3 variety. Once I do, that'll slide this card over to the next cooldown slot. Such and so forth. I play another 2 card, and all cards underneath slide to the 1. You do that there, and then it slides to the 0, where eventually, at the start of your turn, you will then pick up all the cards in your 0 cooldown slot and add them back to your hand. So as I said all that to you right now, you probably thought one of 2 things. Wow, what a really cool resource and hand management type of game, where I have to constantly manage how much action points I have, as well as when to play certain cards into different combos to make sure that I get my cards cooled down and back into my hand. Otherwise, I'm sat there with jack squat to do on my turn. Or, alternatively, you thought the second thing, wow, that is way too much going on. I don't think this is the game for me. Well, chill out there, baby boy, because I have an answer for you. This game is quite accessible, and they offer a little itty-bitty character card as an alternative. You don't want to deal with the deck and the hand management and all that. Well, take this little card instead, where it's still going to give you the defense, the health, the might track, and the action point management, but instead of playing cards, you're just going to get little abilities you can do, such as move, attack, or activate a special ability, and you get special ability cards that are unique to if you play on this mode. So they make it quite accessible, whether you want to do the hand thing or you want to do this thing. Now, I personally, me and my friends, we did the hand thing, and we thought it was just fine. It sounded complicated at first, but once you get into it, it's really not that bad. Alright, so now that you've chosen what accessibility mode you want to play on, let's get into how you're actually going to be resolving each one of your turns. Alright, so remember that might track I mentioned earlier? Well, here it is. Now, as you see, I've got a yellow, a red, and a black, and that's indicated by whatever armor or weapons that I have equipped onto my character. If there's nothing there, you're just going to be using the most basic of white, because you see, all the cards and the dice go up in scale of bad to good. White is going to be basic, then followed by yellow, red, and black is the best, baby. Now, on your turn, you're going to get to do a very cool thing that I've never seen done in a game before, where you can decide on your turn whether you're going to use dice, cards, or a mixture of the 2. And you can go all the way up to the number 10 with a combination of cards, dice, or just 1. Now, you see, if you use dice, that adds a little bit of a random mechanic to it. It's fun to chuck dice. Now, cards, you can count cards in a way. Or if you've pulled enough good ones, you know that only bad ones can be left. And if you pulled enough bad ones, then you know that only good ones can be left. So, saying that I'm resolving this attack, I can only roll 1 of each of the colored dice. So, let's go with black, and I immediately rolled a blank. Now, that's fine. I can keep going because this game has a push your luck mechanic to it. But if I ever end up with a second blank card or second blank dice, then my entire attack is a failure. So, let's just hope that's not the case, and let's go with a red, and I immediately flubbed this. Let's pretend, though, that I didn't, and I pulled a red 3. Then we'll go with a yellow 2. Right now, my attack has done 5 damage. Now, since I'm out of that, I can only go on white from here. Let's say that I rolled this 2 with a squiggly. Well, that is a critical, which means I will get to immediately pull another card or roll another dice of the color that I just crit on. Now, if the next result is a blank, I can discard it, because you cannot blank after a crit. But you keep going on this chain, and I've got another 2. And I'm feeling comfortable now with a 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for my attack. You will compare that to the armor rating of the enemy that you're facing and hope that you are hitting. And this same system is utilized also in the narrative sections, where you're performing different skill checks along the way. Now, for the most part, your characters don't really have skills on their sheet. They're mostly there for combat's sake. But whenever you have to resolve anything in the story, you either pull some cards or roll some dice to see if you succeeded or not against a preset difficulty number. Right, now whilst doing combat, you're going to be moving around the battlefield trying to position yourself around the monster. Don't worry, this monster is not from this board game at all, so no spoilers here. Now, let's say I got all the way behind it and I'm attacking from the rear. Well, depending on where you are is going to be indicated here on the creature's hit location dice. You see, these dice represent the creature's health. Now, I'm hitting from the rear. Let's say I deal, 5 damage, now it's down to 1. But let's say I break the dice altogether. Well, now any attacks from its AI cards that have to do with its tail are going to be hindered. So you can really attack the monster at certain weak points and pick it apart in order to hinder some of its key attacks. And once all of the dice are wiped off of this, you then have defeated the creature. And as I just mentioned, on the creature's turn, they'll be attacking you back with an AI deck that really gives a different feel to each of the monsters. I will say that none of them felt quite the same. You know, you've got creatures that are flying, creatures that are spitting area effects all over the place. You've got creatures that are more dangerous if you're standing behind them and more dangerous if you're standing in front of them. So there's a lot of variety in what you're facing. I would show you the AI cards, but they're pretty straightforward and it would be considered spoilers, so I won't be doing that because, as I said, this game loves its dirty little secrets. So that's pretty much everything combat and gameplay mechanic related. It's relatively straightforward with a nice push your luck mechanic with the cards and the dice, and like I said, if you want to use those character decks, you can. If not, they've got a more dumbed down alternative version for someone that just wants, to spend an evening and turn their brain off. Now, as for the narrative, the other aspect of it, it comes within 21 chapters in these 2 books. Not as big as some of the other narratives that I've been across in these types of board game RPG hybrids, but it is quite substantial, and I will say, first and foremost, the game is absolutely capping when it tells you on the box that the narrative section is going to be 45 minutes and the combat is going to be 90. I'm telling you right now, couldn't be more the opposite. Every time me and my compatriots sat down to read from this book, it was about 2 hours. And then we would get to the fight, and that would only be about 30 to 45 minutes. Now, I might put in some of that on us. We might be a little dyslexic, so, fault is mine. But regardless of that, there is a lot to go through. Each of these chapters functions like a choose-your-own-adventure book. You're going to read a paragraph, and at the end of the paragraph, it's going to ask you, do you want to do A, B, C, D, depends how many options there are. Depending on what you pick, it'll tell you then to flip to a certain paragraph with a certain number and then read from there. So, I do like the narrative selections that you can make. They're a lot more plentiful in this game than in others. Pretty much every paragraph you're making a decision and then going back and going forth and doing this and doing that. It is really cool, but like I said, it is a lot of reading. You will be there for quite some time, and I can definitely tell that at least some of my less narratively inclined friends were sitting there like, come on, man, I'm just trying to be knee-deep inside of a monster. I don't care about this. On top of that, the narrative itself is not that engrossing. It's a pretty typical dark fantasy plot where you and your compatriots are just trying to hunt down the monster of the week until eventually, at the very, very end of the campaign, you start to figure out where these monsters might be coming from and plan to do something about that. So it's really nothing grandiose on that scale, and that's why the characters and the story itself is quite forgettable. You're mostly just using it as narrative flair to get you from one fight to the next. At least that's how it was from my perspective. Now, there is an alternative to this. You can just go in the encounter book where you're going to set up these encounters and read from there, where they condense all of the chapter down to just a brief snippet where you're going to read from just half of a page, perform a few key skill checks that would be featured in the grander narrative, and then move on from there. However, I personally wouldn't recommend this simply because you're going to miss out on at least, I would say, 30 to 40% of the game. You see, because some of my favorite aspects in the narrative section can only be found by reading the actual text from the actual book, because in each of these chapters they do something pretty fun where they introduce some sort of unique mini game. Now, in one chapter, you're going to be performing riddles. In another, puzzles. In another, you're doing, like a sneaking around mission. In another, you're doing a war game. In another, you're going through a maze. So they provide a lot of unique mini games that are tons of fun. And in fact, there was only one mini game that me and my friends didn't like that did get repeated about 3 or 4 times. And after the second time, we were just like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. We're just gonna skip right over this. So other than that one though, all the other mini games were tons of fun, and for that reason alone, I would say not to skip the narrative book and just do it just so you could play those mini games. Now, they do offer another alternative where you can have it read to you by a voice actor from Game of Thrones. I don't know how they pulled that off, but they did. However, as I always say, getting it read to you is just as long as reading it yourself, so that really won't change the time problem. Now, as for the price-content ratio, I would say this game is very well worth it. You're getting all of this stuff for about $200, and that was including the base game with the 2 boxes of miniatures I got on the side. Not to mention, this game comes with a absolutely glorious storage solution that most games don't provide. You see, all of your cards are going to go in each of these 4 boxes, and then everything else goes straight in the middle. There's no lid lift on the box. Everything goes back beautifully, and I cannot commend them enough on that front. They even provide instructions to do so. And that pretty much sums things up on our journey into the Deepwood here. This is a very unique and engrossing boss battling game where I really think they knocked it out of the park and did a good job here. The dice and card push your luck mechanic is one of my personal favorites, as well as the hand management and the cooldown system, personal highlights of mine. The only glaring negatives I can say is the character miniatures that seem to be made out of butter or something, but don't worry, the monsters are concrete, so you won't be having that problem there with them falling apart. And the narrative, as I said, can be long to read, but I personally would recommend it so that you can engage in all those fun mini games that are provided for you. Ultimately, I think I'm going to give Oathsworn a 4 out of 5. It is a good game, and it is one you most definitely should be playing if you are able to. Now, this has been Dungeon Door, and I have been your host, Parthesius Parsnip, and I have brought the dungeon to your door. And I do hope that when I open the next door of adventure, I see you behind it.